I beg to move that the House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Ben, Obese-Jecty.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for granting this important debate on police funding in Cambridgeshire. It has taken a number of attempts to secure this debate, and I'm extremely grateful that it will now be the first adjournment debate of the year. I'm extremely pleased to see so many of my fellow Cambridgeshire MPs in attendance for this debate, and I welcome their timely interventions. Having spoken to several of them about this subject, I know that this is a topic that concerns us all and transcends party politics. The issue of police funding is one that continues to be an issue across the county. I made it a cornerstone of my election campaign and pledged to fight for a fairer funding solution. Last year, Cambridgeshire experienced significant political change, not only in the makeup of its members of parliament, but also in the makeup of its constituencies, with the necessity to add a new parliamentary constituency owing to the increase in the county's population. Cambridgeshire is the fastest growing county, and as such, it is vital that this growing population is properly protected. The subject of police funding in Cambridgeshire has been a growing issue in recent years. Indeed, the way in which our police forces are funded via the government core grant allocation and the policing precept element of the council tax bill has long since led to an unequal distribution of funding across the police forces of England and Wales. Cambridgeshire is the fourth worst funded police force. The discrepancies between the funding available to Cambridgeshire Constabulary and other similar sized forces become apparent when we look at their per capita allocation. In Cambridgeshire, this is only £217.80 per person, whereas in Durham it is £265.17. The national average is £275.20. Cambridgeshire currently receives a raw deal. This is because the police allocation formula that underpins this funding is based on population data that is now hopelessly out of date. The current formula was introduced in the 2013-14 financial year and is based on the population size of Cambridgeshire in 2012. The county, as we all know, has grown significantly in those intervening 13 years. When this is broken down, it shows that this year, 2024-25, the total budget for Cambridgeshire is £197.5 million. This figure is split, 56% government funding and 44% precept. The national average is 66% government funding and 34% precept. So I would like to ask the Minister why Cambridgeshire residents will continue to pick up the slack next year when there was an opportunity to change the formula to better balance that split and reduce the burden by 10%, which would have brought us in line with the national average. Indeed, that figure of £197.5 million is Cambridgeshire's share of the total budget for England and Wales of £16,575.7 million. It represents just 1.2% of total funding. This correlates with Cambridgeshire's share of current police numbers. As of 31st of March 2024, there were 147,746 FTE police officers in England and Wales. Of those, Cambridgeshire had just 1,757 police officers, 1.2%. The government has pledged to restore neighbourhood policing via an uplift of 13,000 new neighbourhood police. This pledge was first made by the now Home Secretary in February 2023, but the recruitment of these officers, as I understand it, won't begin until the 2025-26 financial year and is set to be recruited over the remaining 4 years of the Parliament. So I would like the Minister to clarify whether the 13,000 was on top of the police headcount in February 2023 or against the projected headcount in March 2029, and if the latter, what is the projected headcount for police in England and Wales in March 2029? In November, the Home Secretary confirmed that those 13,000 neighbourhood police would be made up of only 3,000 FTE police, 4,000 PCSOs, 3,000 special constables and 3,000 officers reassigned from other duties. Based on these numbers and the allocation I established earlier, Cambridgeshire, at just 1.2% of these numbers, would receive 36 police officers, spread over the remainder of this Parliament, which is just 9 new officers per year. We have 8 constituencies in Cambridge, and that's realistically just 1 new officer per constituency, and assuming that Peterborough and Cambridge, as our 2 cities, have an increased requirement compared to more rural constituencies, we could very easily see 0 new officers in some Cambridgeshire constituencies. Additionally, the current plan includes the redistribution of 3,000 existing police officers. As the previous calculation showed, at just 1 officer per constituency, it is highly unlikely that we will see any discernible difference. And whilst I appreciate that operational decisions are the responsibility of the Chief Constable, I would gently ask the Minister where she thinks police, in an already overstretched and under-resourced force, will be redistributed from. Before Christmas, I spoke to Cambridgeshire Constabulary about the impact of the government's neighbourhood policing pledge would have. It provides a useful illustration of what the pledge looks like for the forces that haven't been properly resourced. The government have pledged that every neighbourhood will have a named officer, and as things stand, the town of St Ives has a single named officer to cover it, a town with a population of 17,000 residents. That same officer is also the named officer for the smaller market town of Ramsey, 12 miles north, just outside my constituency in northwest Cambridgeshire. A further 6,000 residents. That same officer is also responsible for all of the villages that lie between these two towns. Warboys, Bury, Upwood, Wistow, Broughton, Oldhurst, Woodhurst, Pidley, and I believe even Somersham, Bluntersham, Colne, Erith, Needingworth and Holywell. Conversely, that same area is covered by 2 members of Parliament and over a dozen councillors. How big an area should one officer be expected to cover?
Honourable gentleman, give way at that
I should give way.
Thank you very much for giving way. He makes an interesting point about the reality of policing in a rural area. I represent Central Suffolk and North Ipswich, which is in Suffolk. We are one of the most consistently underfunded police forces across the country. One of the misconceptions, I believe, is that crime in rural areas is made up of there is no crime in rural areas, and rural crime is kind of doesn't require the same manpower. Both are absolutely wrong. And the reality is, crime in rural areas is down to county lines, trafficking, cybercrime and organised crime. Can he speak to the changing nature of crime in Cambridgeshire, like we experience in Suffolk, that rural crime is not easy to police?
Absolutely. I concur wholeheartedly with that assessment. I will come on to in more detail the difficulties of rural crime, both in terms of manpower and also the specifics of rural crime that just simply don't exist in other parts of the country. But I'll come on to that shortly. I think nobody would expect their neighbourhood to be considered as the same neighbourhood as that 12 miles away. When I asked the Policing Minister in November what her definition of a community is, I didn't receive an answer and was told that more detail will be set out in due course. So I would like the Minister to clarify what her definition of a community is in the context of the size of community a single officer should be expected to cover. Could she also clarify what additional resources the Government will provide in Cambridgeshire to ensure that their neighbourhood policing pledge can realistically be met by the St Ives Safer Neighbourhood Team and indeed safer neighbourhood teams across the county? Speaking to residents in some of our rural villages and communities, particularly those west of the A1 in my constituency, the issue of a lack of visible police presence is a constant theme. Many residents complain that they never see a police officer in their community, and this chimes with the Government's own findings. According to Labour, half of the public said they never or almost never see an officer on patrol. So could the Minister clarify how the Government's neighbourhood policing pledge will address the paucity of visible policing in rural areas? In villages such as Brinkton and Molesworth, residents benefit from the presence of the Ministry of Defence Police. Nearby RAF Molesworth is operated by the United States Air Force Europe, and with the vast majority of US Air Force personnel living in the local community rather than on base, MOD police patrol in the surrounding villages in order to ensure the safety of US personnel. And whilst this provides a police presence of sorts, local residents should not have to rely on the nearby presence of the US military in order to see the presence of visible police. As a result of the lack of confidence felt by some residents in the lack of a visible police presence and deterrence, residents in some local villages have turned to private security firms like Blue Line, who cover the area from Catworth to Hale Weston, with monitoring and response to calls or alarm activations from those who pay for the service. As a local resident who knows that their village will be without any sort of visible police deterrent, this is a sensible option for the peace of mind that it brings, but it should not even be a consideration. I'll give way.
Can I commend the Honourable Gentleman for Huntingdon for bringing this forward? I spoke to him beforehand. One of the great issues in the rural countryside that I represent and he represents and others represent is the theft of farm machinery. It is in the early hours of the morning in many cases. In Northern Ireland, the police, the PSNI, work alongside the Ulster Farmers Union. Has the original gentleman aware that the police in his constituency work alongside with the National Farmers Union to mark all the machinery so if it is stolen, they can then trace where it goes. I know in Northern Ireland it goes south towards the Republic and then comes across to England. It would be one of those things perhaps maybe the police and the NFU could look together at.
I agree with the manner of the rural crime that takes place, and I will come on to talk about the rural crime action team that we have in Cambridgeshire in due course and how they deal with those specific threats of that type of rural crime.
He highlights the very important point in terms of rural crime, and he set out a very powerful case in terms of how Cambridgeshire is underfunded per capita compared to other forces, but how that is more acute in areas such as Fenland, which are rural constituencies. But could he not also see the irony in the Prime Minister launching his housing strategy in Cambridge and the fact that the government says it wants to see much more housing in Cambridgeshire, and yet its per capita funding discriminates against Cambridgeshire as an area.
Indeed, the Right Honourable Member produces a good point. The Prime Minister, of course, launched his housing campaign at Alchemy Weald, which is in my constituency. That's currently around 1,500 houses. There are another 4,000 homes to be built in that location. So it is indeed a great irony that we are talking about per capita funding in an area which is growing as quickly as it is. And so that is something that I do feel we need to address as a matter of urgency. Shall I give way?
To my old friend, we knew each other in a previous life, different parties, but we do go way back. What that does for history, God of mine, I don't know, but I wanted to be here to support him. Talking about irony, I wonder if he agrees with me how ironic it is that a former Chief Secretary is part of a debate about fewer police officers or lack of, and a lack of funding to which the Honourable Gentleman from Huntingdon has just referred. And I wonder whether he would share my questioning and quizzical interest in where those officers were and where that funding was.
And Obese-Jecty.
My question around funding specifically is around the way that Cambridgeshire is shortchanged by the police allocation formula. As I explained earlier, I think this is the core nub of the issue within Cambridgeshire, the fact that the funding is so out of date. And as we talked just earlier with regards to the growth of Cambridgeshire, if we can adjust the police allocation formula, that will go some way to filling that gap. And it isn't just Cambridgeshire as well. I know that places like Lincolnshire, which are even worse funded than Cambridgeshire, would benefit from that formula being looked at as well.
Can the Honourable Gentleman give way for a moment?
Very quickly.
I will just for a quick moment. I think it's a point to raise at this moment, having just come from a debate on child sexual exploitation, that we are seeing the nature of crime in rural areas change very, very quickly. And the challenges faced by police forces 5-10 years ago is not the challenge they face today. And the reality is in Suffolk, we've got a massive problem with trafficking. We've got a massive problem with prostitution. We've got problems that were just not there 10 years ago. And it's all very well, people opposite, to say, well, what did you do about it? We are here now debating how to meet the challenges of today, not yesterday. Can he speak to that for a moment?
I thank my honourable friend for mentioning that. I think you're very right in terms of the nature of the threat that's now faced. I think aspects like modern slavery go unseen within rural communities. I can think of countless examples within even my own constituency where individuals have been found within sort of isolated warehouses and barns out in the countryside, usually with somewhere like a cannabis farm. I even attended a cannabis farm with members of Cambridgeshire Constabulary right in the middle of St Ives that showed that there were a number of individuals who had been living there and working there, presumably under duress. And so this is something that goes unseen, and I think increasing that ability to reach those unseen areas is going to be hugely important. To that extent, I would ask the Minister how the Government's neighbourhood policing pledge will restore confidence in Cambridgeshire's rural communities who feel that their needs are not necessarily a priority. In April, the Prime Minister pledged that Britain's rural communities will be protected with the first ever government-backed rural crime strategy. So could I ask the Policing Minister to confirm when that rural crime strategy will be published and how it will benefit Cambridgeshire specifically, given we have already established that there will be little in the way of additional resource for the county's police force? I shall give way.
Member, as you're touching on rural crime, I think that's a major issue in Cambridgeshire. It's a major issue in my constituency. Yes, you can mark big farm machinery, but people are stealing parts of the farm machinery. They're much more difficult to track. And also hair coursing is a major problem. And just as you're saying, the sheer area of Cambridgeshire that our police force, very tiny number of police we have, is expected to cover. So will you ask the Minister to ensure that when they're diverting police, as they're talking about doing, they do not divert them from the rural crime unit. Indeed, they look to bolster that rural crime unit as well.
I thank the honourable member for a contribution, and I would add to that. I spoke to a local farmer a few weeks ago, and I asked him, sort of, with regards to how he would tackle something like hair coursing on his land. At what point do you feel emboldened enough to stand up to those individuals? And he explained to me quite simply. He said, it is too dangerous. He said, even though we're farmers, we're big burly blokes, We have shotguns, but even then, he said, a friend of mine had petrol, was doused in petrol and had a match held to him by those responsible for hair coursing. It is simply not worth risking your life in order to take these people on. And in fact, hair coursing is a 999 call. If you see a vehicle that you suspect is involved in hair coursing, a 4x4, no plates, a couple of lurchers in the back, that is a 999 call and will prompt an adequate response. But that is a perfect segue as I come on to rural crime. Rural crime itself is a specialist area and as such requires officers who understand how to tackle it. With the influence of organised crime, we see hair coursing, machinery, equipment, GPS, fuel and livestock thefts, crimes that require a specialist team. Cambridgeshire Rural Crime Action Team is one of the best, and having joined them recently for an operation, I've been able to see firsthand how effective they are. A team that punches above its weight despite being under-resourced. It was just over a year ago that they were awarded the Rural Initiative of the Year by the NFU for Operation Walrus, spearheading a national crackdown on GPS theft. In April, the now Home Secretary pledged that Labour will crack down on these criminals, establishing a dedicated rural crime strategy to restore order to our rural areas, backed up with tougher powers and increased rural police patrols. I would ask the Policing Minister how this pledge will apply to Cambridgeshire. How will the government's pledged rural crime strategy restore order to a county that is 90% rural? How will the Home Secretary's commitment to increased rural police patrols translate into increased support for an under-resourced specialist team like RCAT, as well as an increase in visible police presence? In October of last year, Cambridgeshire County Council passed a motion that directly addressed the issue of fairer police funding. The motion was brought by Councillor Alex Bulak, the Labour candidate in Huntingdon during the last election, and my opponent. And as I mentioned at the start of my speech, fighting for fairer police funding for Cambridgeshire was one of my election pledges to my now constituents. So whilst Councillor Bulak never addressed the issue of police funding during the election campaign, I'm hugely pleased to see her take up that fight now and raise it at County Council level. The motion called for this Labour government to ensure Cambridgeshire has its fair share of the new neighbourhood police officers and that they are fully funded by the Central Policing Corps grant. It asked for Cambridgeshire MPs to lobby for a fairer funding deal for our county through changes to the government's police grant allocation that better reflects current population data and local factors. The Policing Minister knows well that I've been campaigning for fairer funding. This debate is not the first time I've addressed it with her, and I appreciate her tolerance, either in person or via written questions. In her response, could the Policing Minister respond directly to the request posed in the motion from Cambridgeshire County Council and explain to them why they haven't yet received a fairer funding deal? And with that, I give the Policing Minister the opportunity to respond to these questions. But lastly, to request whether she and the Home Secretary would meet with me and with our other Cambridgeshire MPs and our Police and Crime Commissioner to discuss the steps required to update the police allocation formula so that government funding for 2025-26 is based upon Cambridgeshire's current and future population size, not the population as it was by then nearly a decade and a half ago, and to redress the imbalance that sees Cambridgeshire residents contribute 10% more than the average across England and Wales to make up the government's shortfall. Our constituents in Cambridgeshire deserve to feel safe. They deserve to receive the full protection that the government can provide, and they deserve not to have to pay over the odds to receive that. Thank you.
Yeah. Minister Dame Diana Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And let me begin by wishing everyone a very happy new year, especially to you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and to the honourable gentleman who has secured this important debate this evening, and to all Cambridgeshire MPs who are present in the Chamber. And also, I must wish a happy new year to the Member of Parliament for Strangford, who is starting the year as he finished the last one in contributing to every adjournment debate that is held in this place. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank all the police staff, PCSOs and specials who were on duty over Christmas and the New Year, keeping us all safe. I had the privilege to see this firsthand in Birmingham city centre when I accompanied West Midlands Police and also in Bedford with Bedfordshire Police just before the Christmas recess. Now, quite understandably, I know the honourable gentleman is focused on police funding as it relates to his constituency and his police force, and I will come to the specific question on Cambridgeshire Constabulary shortly, but I just want to start by referring to the provisional police funding settlement for England and Wales that was laid before the House just before the Christmas recess. The headlines are that in 25-26, overall funding for policing will rise to £19.5 billion. This is an increase of up to £1 billion from this financial year, and we are investing in key areas. We've listened to what the police had to say on the challenges that they face and secured a settlement that seeks to address those concerns and provides the building blocks for our programme of reform. Now, included in that figure is £100 million to kickstart our commitment on neighbourhood policing and put officers back into the heart of communities. We are also covering the cost to policing of the changes to employers' national insurance contributions and the costs of the police pay awards. So turning now to the specific points raised in the debate, and in particular funding for Cambridgeshire Constabulary, first of all, I just want to remind the House that it's worth saying that it's for police and crime commissioners to set their annual budget for their police force area, including the level of police precept. It is for the operationally independent Chief Constable to decide how to use the resources to meet the Police and Crime Commissioner's priorities. So having said that, in the next financial year, funding for Cambridgeshire will rise by up to £11.1 million. This is a cash increase of up to 5.6% compared to the current year and 3.1% real terms increase. And on the provision of funding for employers' national insurance contributions, which I just referred to, I just want to confirm again that the distribution will not be based on the funding formula shares, and I hope that that will provide some reassurance to the force. Now, we do understand that comparing funding between forces will result in highs and lows, and I do commend Cambridgeshire's leadership for running an efficient force that has maintained officer numbers and worked to keep the community safe in a very challenging financial environment. The financial shocks of recent years, as well as the position that we inherited from the previous government, have meant taking some tough choices. But we believe that we've managed to secure a balanced settlement for policing, while still managing to drive forward with our key commitments. In return, we have also been very clear that we expect police forces to look for ambitious ways to drive efficiency and productivity and to make real improvements. And we are supporting this through our recently announced Commercial Efficiencies and Collaboration Programme, which will have its early focus on procurement frameworks and working to use the full advantage of police buying power, alongside the potential for greater cost recovery. I'd also just like to point out to the House that the announcement that was made in December was the provisional police settlement, and it's now open to consultation until the 10th of January. So Cambridgeshire Police Force have the opportunity to make further representations in this period up until the 10th of January. So I just want to now deal with the Honourable Gentleman's concerns regarding the funding formula. In particular, I do note that population change can be a variable across different parts of the country, and I note what the Honourable Gentleman said, and I recognise that in those forces that have seen bigger changes, they will be keen to ensure that the funding they receive keeps pace with demands. And on that basis, I just want to say to the Honourable Gentleman that we have, in the provisional police settlement, delivered a real terms increase in funding for Cambridgeshire Police for next year. And the one, if I just finish this point, then I will take the intervention, and the £1 billion overall increase in the police settlement next year comes at a time, and this is actually perhaps a very pertinent point to make this comment in light of who wishes to intervene on me next, this is coming at a time when the government is having to make, as I said before, tough decisions on budgets after inheriting a £22 billion black hole as we work to fix the economy. But I'm very happy to give way.
Well, I mean, that's a separate point, because my honourable friend was making the point in terms of the share of the existing pie, not in terms of whether more funding is put in. It's the proportion that Cambridgeshire gets. But I wanted just to pick up on a specific point. You very interestingly said the consultation is still open until the 10th of January. That's not very far away. Could she clarify what criteria she will apply in making adjustments to that provisional allocation? Is that published? Because I think a lot of members may not be cited on what changes may be made to the allocation and how the government will reach that decision.
Well, the Right Honourable Gentleman is a very experienced member of this House, and he will know that this is the normal process that goes on when the provisional settlement is announced before Christmas. There is then an opportunity for police forces to come forward to make further representations or to query figures. That's always been the case. There's nothing new about this process that we are using. But I think it is important just to note, as I said, that we are having to make difficult decisions at this time because of the inheritance that we have. I also just want to make the point that the government grants are not the only source of income available to police forces. And in 25-26, PCCs in England have the flexibility to increase the precept by up to £14 for a Band D equivalent property, or go further should they wish to by holding a local referendum. And I note that the Cambridgeshire PCC has chosen to maximise precept in previous years, and subject to that decision for 25-26, 44% of Cambridgeshire's police settlement funding will be raised locally via that police precept. And while I know the Honourable Gentleman is concerned about the additional demand that a population increase may create for Cambridgeshire Police, I would also ask him to consider the positive impact that this may bring forward to the council tax base, and as a result, the level of income that can be generated locally by the PCC. And in response to the direct question that the Honourable Gentleman asked me about reviewing the funding formula, I can say that to support the delivery of this government's Safer Streets mission, we have been clear that broader policing reform is necessary to address the challenges faced by policing and help the system to deliver effective and efficient policing to the public. And I note the contributions that have been made about the changing face of crime in this country and the challenges that police forces have to face. So that's why we've set out very clearly a reform agenda. And of course, the allocation of funding to police forces remains an important consideration in that reform work. And phase 2 of the spending review will give us an opportunity to consider police funding in the medium term, ensuring that it aligns with our programme of reform and delivery of the Safer Streets mission. I will give way very quickly.
Thank you very much. I thank the Minister for giving way, and I really welcome the increase in police funding that Cambridgeshire is having. I understand the concerns that are being raised. There is a lot of growth happening in and around Cambridgeshire. Can the Minister reassure me that her department will be having the relevant conversations with MHCLG and others as that happens to make sure that we can show residents how we're supporting police growth as the population expands?
Yes, I'm very happy to give my honourable friend that assurance, and I just quickly want to address the issue of neighbourhood policing. And I'm sure that we can all agree that public confidence in policing is always better when the police are visible and there are officers in the heart of communities building real relationships with the people they serve. And we know that there are many ways for the public to contact the police, but we hear consistently that the public values a local visible policing presence, and that's why we're committed to rebuilding neighbourhood policing after it was decimated over previous 14 years. So we will have a named contactable police officer for every community. That will be a key part of the neighbourhood policing guarantee. We will set out exactly what the public can expect from their neighbourhood policing teams. And we've kick-started, as I said earlier on, with a commitment of £100 million funding next year to start that work of putting 13,000 police officers back in our communities. I want to finish by offering my congratulations again to the Honourable Gentleman for securing the debate and for all the others who have contributed. Whether we look at this through a national or local lens, police resourcing does matter. It matters to the brave and hard-working officers and staff who work every day to keep the rest of us safe, and it matters to the communities that they serve, whether in Cambridgeshire, with its rural and urban areas, or anywhere else. And that is why we have, in the provisional funding settlement, set out our intention to make a very substantial investment into policing, and it's why we're working closely with forces to equip them for the challenges they face and to deliver our Safer Streets mission. We're already making progress, and we will drive this further with our investment in neighbourhood policing in this settlement.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, the ayes have it. Order, order.